I'm constantly impressed and just inspired by the way that Afghan women and girls grab onto an opportunity when it's as you say, the simple thing of internet, $9 or $10 a month, and it will change somebody's life. We were able to participate in a program where Coursera gave licenses for some organizations who could then share them with women. So we got licenses, and we had girls in our program who completed over 100 courses in a year. They just went nuts, and they're learning languages, they're learning skills, they're just maxing out what's being given to them. And I really think in a generation or so, like, we're going to have so many incredibly talented Afghan women who've just said, okay, I'm not allowed to physically go here or there. Let me get online and I will do everything.
Hello, everyone. Today on the Sherazad Foundation mini podcast, I'm joined by Marina Legree, founder of the Ascend Athletics initiative, which is an inspirational initiative that seeks to empower Afghan women through leadership and outdoor adventure. Marina has had a long association with Afghanistan and has worked alongside Afghan women in some of the country's most remote regions, helping them to build confidence and independence as well. She knows as well as anyone about the amazing fortitude, the courage, and the resilience of Afghan women and the immense challenges that they currently face. Marina, welcome to the Sherazad Foundation mini podcast. So great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I am just thrilled because when I think of Afghanistan, the first thing I think of are the mountains and the landscapes. And I've got goosebumps just thinking of air. Gosh, I'm totally covered in goosebumps. Thinking of the air that is so crystal clear with mountains that are so colossal that no one in their right mind would ever try to climb them. But the mountains and the outside world of Afghanistan are really, for me anyway, what signifies that country and the culture that it's given birth to. Can you, before we dive in, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your background and how you arrived the first time in Afghanistan?
Sure. I grew up in a small town in the mountains, very different mountains in Washington State. So they're very green, very rainy, and an awful lot smaller than what's in Afghanistan. But I was outdoors all the time. It was a small farm that I grew up on, and we were always hiking and doing chores and things like that in the mountains. So I had a huge degree of freedom and also a sense of adventure and exploration. Both of my parents were into outdoor adventure. My father was canoed all over Alaska, that my parents rode their bicycles across the United States back in the 70s, things like that. So I had this notion of seeking adventure. And that's part of, I suppose, what took me to Afghanistan in the first place in 2005. I arrived there in January 2005 for the first time. And like you, I was absolutely struck by the mountains. They're just phenomenal and so huge and overwhelming and really beautiful and so different from anything I was used to. Um, and I fell in love with them quite quickly.
Why were you, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was there. I was working for the International Organization for Migration, doing community development work, and I wasn't particularly interested in Afghanistan when I went there. It was just where there happened to be an opening. My studies were all about the Caucasus and the former Soviet Union. Um, but then obviously I changed my mind and ended up living there for about 5 years. I took to it. Um, but it was mainly because of where I was sent. I didn't really spend time in Kabul. It was all in the rural parts of the country in Badakhshan province, which is beautiful.
Amazing. You know, one of my most cherished photographs was taken by my grandfather, who was an Afghan writer and traveler, Iqbal Ali Shah, in Badakhshan in 1923. And it's a picture of a man and a yak in black and white on a hillside. And it's a big print. I've got his original bromide print. And I've never been to Badakhshan, but that has always lured me. I dream of it. I think of it. How can you describe Badakhshan? How is it different from, other parts of the country?
What I loved about it at that time was the remoteness. There was no pavement in the entire province, zero. And it took us about 6 hours just to get to the border of the next province. It was a 2-day drive to get to Kabul. So that suited us fine because headquarters was a long way away and we had a lot of freedom. And we also had a lot of access to really interact with local people, which is what drew me there in the first place. We had many nights where we would go, we were doing development projects, so drinking water supplies, um, building health clinics and schools and roads, irrigation canals, things like that. So I worked with a team of engineers who are all Afghan. And we would have to go, for example, and find the spring source if we were going to increase the catchment and improve drinking water. So that involved climbing up to go find it, which was always really fun. And that was kind of what planted the seeds for Ascend, because I remember the men who were always the leaders of the area that would go with us, they were always astonished that I was fit, that physically fit. I could go up the mountain, no problem. And some of them were, mujahideen from back in the day and, quite tough. And I could keep up with them. And they just didn't think of females in that way. And of course, I'm sure Afghan women were every bit as fit as me, but they didn't do those things or go out in the same way that I was. So yeah, it was quite remote. I was um, often out driving long distances on dusty roads and stopping in to stay with communities on the way in mud brick houses, having tea and food with welcoming local people. It was a really special kind of a time. I remember when the Afghan army, it didn't exist when we first got there. And I remember when they first arrived in Badakhshan, driving up in their Ford Ranger pickups, and everybody lined up on the side of the road and watched them come in. And they were from other provinces as well. We were all kind of gawking at them. But yeah, it was a different time and very different from what was to come later. So that was what hooked me in to
And how
Afghanistan.
did you find, the culture of Afghanistan and the hospitality and, the mindset? I can only call it an Afghan mindset, which to some people is a little bit crazy.
It is a
To
little crazy.
those of us who love it, is the way everywhere should be, really. Although it's a big thing, Afghan hospitality and, culture.
It is a big thing. And if you can imagine, an American, I had traveled before. I wasn't totally wide-eyed and innocent, but I was young in my, I think, late 20s by the time I got there. And I'm as white can be. And I absolutely didn't fit, but people welcomed me and were so good to me. And we had a wonderful staff as well. That was kind of my way in. People would invite me to their homes on Fridays, and the provincial governor as well. He was new to the province, just like I was, and his wife would invite me over to their house on Fridays too. And so I got to be the beneficiary of that legendary hospitality at a time in my life when I was quite alone. There was not like an expat scene or anything like that. Um, so I said yes to every invitation and spent many hours happily sitting around on toshaks having tea, sometimes sleeping there, and um, I loved it. That it was a really special thing to be welcomed into a place that's culturally so very different. Linguistically as well. I remember one year on the Afghan New Year, a friend invited me to his family's home in Mazar-e Sharif, and we were traveling separately. I think I had taken a car and he was going to fly or something. He got delayed. So there I was with his family who I'd never met. And they all welcomed me. There was one nephew who spoke a smattering of English from school, but nobody else. So there I was trying to figure it out. But they completely spoiled me over the holiday and fed me. And, the women showed me how to make food. And the whole experience was really unique. And yeah, again, coming back to that that welcoming hospitality was really something special.
Actually, you've just reminded me of something, which is that in Afghanistan, it is totally and perfectly acceptable to sit in silence for long periods of time. In Europe, that would be perceived, and particularly probably the US as well, as awkward silence. But my sense is Afghans are so self-assured with who they are. I don't know. I mean, what I'm throwing out is this idea that they don't need to do what I'm always desperate to do, which is to fill silence with babble, because I'm anxious when there's silence. But Afghans, do you know what I mean? They have this, just, I don't know, this calmness.
There's, yeah, the calmness and the humor is also something that really sticks out at me. And when the conditions are harsh, like they were at the time and place where I spent the most time, um, people are hilarious. And it's just this gallows humor that comes out. And I love that aspect of things. And that's why I wanted to learn the language, because people always say the funniest things under their breath in their own language. Um, so that was fun. But yeah, sitting in silence also suits me perfectly well. I felt quite comfortable in some surprising ways. The other thing that I love is over meals. I had been living in Georgia where people drag out a meal. It's the thing that Georgians do. They have fabulous feasts, but it goes on for like 6 hours, and people are tend to be very gregarious, and there's wine and there's like a gazillion different things to try. And Afghans are kind of the other end of the spectrum. There's all this fabulous food, but everybody's busy making the food. And then you come and you do that really cool hand washing ritual. And then people eat, and then that's it.
It's
You're
done.
not chatting while you're eating. You're kind of busy just eating that food. And then it's perfectly acceptable to keel over and go to sleep right afterwards, or just leave. And I love that. It's a when you're done eating, you can go.
Exactly. And how did the Afghans, how did they perceive this idea of hiking for the sake of hiking? I'm not trying to knock it, but because my sense is when I've been in Afghanistan and we've hiked, we've had to go somewhere. We never went anywhere just for the sake of it. You know what I mean? And it's a bit like in you know, in Europe, I always hear that the Europeans invented, so-called invented mountaineering, because like in Nepal, no one would climb a mountain for, historically just for the sake of it. So how did Afghans take to the idea of hiking?
Yeah, you're in the mountains there because either you're a shepherd or you're a fighter, or maybe you're on the way to somewhere. But yeah, recreating in the mountains was definitely not a thing. People were somewhat aware in Badakhshan of the Westerners who would come in to climb Mount Noshak or other mountains in the Pamirs, but they just thought it was totally out of the realm. It just wasn't something that people thought was worth anything. So I leaned on the relationships that I had with people that I had known for years who could at least understand who I am, that I didn't have any ill intent, and that I'm basically a reliable person. And I said, just give me time, like don't stop me. And I swear this is going to be good for these girls. We won't do them any harm, and they're going to come back with more confidence, more skills. And their attitude at first was kind of like, it's kind of a waste of time, but you seem nice enough, so go ahead and give it a shot.
And
I think
tell me how it came about with the first, first girls and women hiking, and how did that go down? And
so. The very first thing that we did was meet their parents. And I went to people's homes and had that face to face so that they could see I wasn't bonkers and, someone who would do harm to their daughter. And also, I tried to emphasize at that point, I'd been living in Afghanistan for some years. So people could also, I think they thought I was a little crazy for sure. But again, nice enough and seemed reliable. And I brought also professional guides from the US, UK, Norway, so there was assurance of safety, and competence basically. But yeah, we first went with girls who were already athletes, and they were part of the Taekwondo Federation in Kabul, or they had played basketball. So they were, inclined to do this already, and their parents were already inclined to let them participate in something sporty. And that was the seed. There were 8 girls the first year, and then that quickly doubled and tripled, and it's just snowballed from there. But we really emphasized those family relationships. And every time we went somewhere, we would go to Panjshir and spend 3 days backcountry trekking, camping, do a little rock climbing, and then come back to Kabul and give a slideshow, basically, so that the parents could see, like, this is a tent. Because it's really hard to even imagine, what are you doing out there? What are the conditions? What do you eat? How do you use the bathroom? So we would take pictures and like walk them through what the girls were doing. And I think word spread that this was a good program. So we got, quickly we got way more applicants than we had room for. But we also tried to invite parents along, like we would have a mom's day once in a while, or it was always female only. And I think that gave a lot of reassurance to people as well. Yeah.
I just got a flash of something. A few years ago, I had a conversation with an English female mountain climber, and she's led female groups up Everest and to Antarctica, and elsewhere. She said something to me that I've never forgotten. I asked her, how do women do things differently in hiking and mountaineering? And she said to me, there's a very obvious answer to that. And it's that men are always trying to be the first one up the mountain, or the first one to the camp, or the first one to brush their teeth in the morning, or whatever it is. And she said to me, women are inclusive. They do it as a group. Nobody's trying to break the barriers or the boundaries outside the group. Is that what you've experienced as well?
Absolutely. And I should say too, it's never about the mountain. Like, we're not there to climb mountains. We're there to provide space and access and a transformational experience for people. And the mountains are there. They're the privilege we have to be in that space. But we take girls out into nature, into the backcountry, so they can be away from normal routines and competition and social pressures and roles that they normally play. And yeah, we really try to discourage competition for that reason, that it's not about, you're not conquering the mountain. The mountain is there. You're lucky enough to be in that place. And so mental health and wellness is a big part of what we do as well. So we'll start each day with yoga, for example, no matter where we are. We do some yoga and really center and appreciate where we are. And there's a big component as well of environmental stewardship, of being conscious of the landscapes that we are recreating in and how to keep them the way that they are. Um, yeah.
And can I ask you, under the current administration of Afghanistan, is it possible to continue this initiative at the moment, or in any shape or form?
Yes, we are absolutely continuing, and actually much bigger than we ever were, ironically. In 2023, we relaunched. We kept the same facility but all of the people left, every last one that were part of the program, and the staff in 2021. So, but as I talked about at the beginning, I had friends that had gone back years. And so an old friend of mine from Badakhshan, I called him. He's a smart guy with a good perspective. And I said, I want to continue this thing. I know it's going to be difficult, and we probably won't be able to do the outdoor element. But as I said, it's never been about the mountain. It's about the confidence building and the teamwork and the self-awareness and mental health and other aspects. So can we reshape that and still have a meaningful program without going outside? And he gave it a think, and he said, yeah, we can do this. No problem. So he's
Wonderful.
our
Because
country, and we don't go outside to do sport. We go outside to do community projects and volunteering, which is a heavy emphasis. Um, so that's how.
is at Sherazade Foundation, whatever we do, we try to do through really the vision or the lens of Sherazade in A Thousand and One Nights, the wise queen, who did things differently. And as we've continued, you know, over the years, we've realized that women do things differently than men. Men do things in the worst way, and I'm ashamed of my gender. They do things to get attention for themselves, and just like we were saying, not for the good of the whole, but for the good of themselves. And at the moment, we're working on an initiative called Azada Women, which is to provide free internet to ordinary women and girls in Afghanistan who are essentially in lockdown, as you know. And at a time when money is tight, you know, the $8, $9, $10 a month needed to pay an internet bill that's often not money that there is lying around. So what we found is that Afghan women are, you know, so excited about taking part in things. And that's not just Afghan women in Afghanistan, but in the diaspora as well. I've been having conversations with women in Afghanistan, but also all over the world. And what I've noticed is as soon as, you know, after 2021, when a lot of Afghan families managed to get out of Afghanistan, the families who are living in Ireland or Canada or the United States or elsewhere, they are, particularly the women, they are taking part in all kinds of courses and initiatives, because it's almost that they're doing it, and I'm almost choked up saying this, but they're doing it for the women they've left behind in Afghanistan. So they're doing it because they're free. And maybe that sounds preposterous, but to me, it just sounds, you know, it sounds amazing.
I think you're exactly right. And I'm constantly impressed and just inspired by the way that Afghan women and girls grab onto an opportunity when it's in, as you say, the simple thing of internet, $9 or $10 a month, and it will change somebody's life. We were able to participate in a program where Coursera gave licenses for some organizations who could then share them with women. So we got licenses, and we had girls in our program who completed over 100 courses in a year. They just went nuts, and they're learning languages, they're learning skills, they're just maxing out what's being given to them. And I really think in a generation or so, like, we're going to have so many incredibly talented Afghan women who've just said, okay, I'm not allowed to physically go here or there. Let me get online and I will do everything. They
That's
just,
exactly what we've discovered as well. And the level of competency is just, it blows us away. I was just speaking to an Afghan woman in Dublin who learned English in the last 4 years, came without a word, is speaking with an Irish accent, has locked in on the Irish culture, which is wonderful. You know, that it just seems like the perfect I don't know, mix for Afghans to be in Dublin and probably Irish people to be in Afghanistan, because it's like, I don't it's a, you know, it's just
it's another story for another day, but we had 20 Irish visas that some of our Irish supporters secured for Ascend for our girls during that 2021 crisis. And as a result, we now have a group of our alumni settled in Dublin and in Galway. And the community that built up around that of Irish and Afghan, it's amazing. And actually, there's a hike for her on Saturday in Dublin, led by one of our alumni with all these. But the Irish community is just, they've been amazing. So,
fantastic.
yeah.
Um, with this mini podcast, we'll post your URL, your address. It's ascendathletics.org/Afghanistan. And really, and you know, I'm following you on social media, and this afternoon you posted a picture that took me right back to not Afghanistan, but to the north of Pakistan and the light and just the beauty of, the mountains in that part of the world. It's something that almost defies description. It's just magical. Marina, thank you so much for being part of the Sherazad Foundation mini podcast. We are thrilled by your initiative and for inspiring us. Thank you.
Happy to do it. Lovely to talk with you, and I hope we'll do it again.